Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Matty B. And we had one crazy day of NFL deadline, but we're going to get started here with high tempo. Matt, you guys wrapped up your final game of the year. You want to give us a review on your season, how you're doing?
Not doing well. It sucks being out of the playoffs this early. But season ended up, and just the youth movement. So we've had a lot of younger players play over the course of the year, and definitely a lot of growing pains. But the nice thing is, going into the next couple years, we have a lot of young players that saw meaningful minutes. So I mean, we're only going to grow from this point going forward. We have the construction ongoing for our stadium project, so that's a huge thing that I really believe next year we're actually going to have true home games where we don't have to be on the bus. So you just don't know how excited I am to be able to have home games in the home environment, because I think that's something that's really been missing the last couple of years.
And that has to be hard on the kids too, because like I know whenever you're playing at different fields, because our high school was in a different town than what we played local ball. So like my local ball, I always assumed was like, I didn't assume, like that, to me that felt more like a home field. And we played there for a little bit. We even used my home field in like college for part of the year or whatever, some of the games. So like I felt like I always played better at home. So playing all of your games in someone else's stadium has to be tough.
Yeah. I want to try to downplay, because it's been so long that we've played there that we've just adjusted. But I mean, I think the kids handled it as well as you possibly could have. Like, I think it was more of an issue last year because there was so much time that you felt like, oh yeah, because of the pandemic, because of the season ending prematurely because of COVID, that it was like, oh, we'll definitely have time to get everything done. And then as it got closer to the season and there was all this talk that, oh yeah, the stadium will be done, and you don't see any trucks out, you don't see any movement, it's like real disheartening to find it's like, all right, there's logistically no way that this is going to happen. And I think they found the best possible alternative playing at Hollidaysburg. I mean, the stadium was enormous, turf field, like everything that you could have asked for in a host stadium. It wasn't too far away from where we were at, but at the end of the day, it's somebody else's stadium, it's somebody else's stuff, and it was just one more thing that you had to worry about from week to week.
And that brings up our first topic. We're still making some adjustments on the show, so if you want to hear the full version of the show and a little bit more behind the scenes stuff, go to patreon.com/southboundsports. We're going to get into our first topic here for high tempo. I'm trying to break them up a little bit more, and we're going to have extra ones each week that are going to be exclusive to Patreon only. So you can go there or go to southboundsports.com, and you can see all of our stuff there. But I got a first one for you, Matt, since you brought up stadium, field of play. It's been trending. All right, the first question for you. I saw a lot of NFL guys tweeting about this and complaining, turf versus grass. As a coach, which do you prefer and why?
Well, I think it's kind of a loaded question. Me personally, I like turf. I think it's a faster surface. I think there's less variables in the surface, because you go to 10 different places, you're going to deal with 10 different playing surfaces. And separate from the college and pro game, at the high school level, you have your varsity playing on that field. You have your JV. You have your junior high. A lot of times you have 3 different levels of flag and tackle football playing on it. If you're a bigger school, you have soccer playing on it. So there's so much wear and tear that's happening that grass is constantly getting ripped up, that by the end of the year, if you have any type of rain or any type of weather, you're basically playing on a mud bog.
And so I like the grass for that reason, but just some additional details here. This isn't AstroTurf anymore. I've played on AstroTurf. You didn't want to fall down. Rip your elbow up. Rip your knee up. That's why you had the knee pads. It was probably made for AstroTurf. People don't wear them anymore because doesn't exist. The turf now has like rubber chips in it. So it's very consistent. It's a faster playing field. I think that's where you see a difference of like, hey, Penn State's struggling with Northwestern like in the rain or whatever. Like you get some of the elements on turf, but like an indoor turf, you get none of that. It's easier to maintain. So I do like that aspect of it because you don't have to worry about all these other high schools. Like we can't really afford to keep football going. Field maintenance is one other issue. With the turf field, you're paying one time, and hopefully you're able to get a decade or so out of it without ever having to touch it again. With grass, halfway through the year you get a bad storm. You have to do like a little build up in the middle so that the rain runs down. If a drain gets clogged, there are issues. The photo I have up here is like the grass dying. You can easily see where like some teams like bring in like new turf or basically like a new grass sod. I mean, not just like a turf thing because they have to rebuild it and try to regrow it in the winter. Not going to work so much up north. So
well, hell, look at what the Steelers go through. Like right now starts the playoffs for Pennsylvania schools. Within the next 2 weeks, or the next couple weeks, I should say, as games start to get played at Heinz Field, then they have the high school games played there, Pitt playing there, and the Steelers. Their field looks ridiculous. And there's always some issue where the grass is getting pulled up and they have to try to bring in the new grass, like you're saying, and try to resurface it to keep it as a consistent playing field. I think it's an advantage for people that have bigger offensive linemen that you can get a push. If you can maintain your footing, I think it's an advantage to teams that are bigger. In a situation like my high school where my guys are a lot smaller, it doesn't give us an advantage playing on those softer surfaces because we're getting pushed more down the field.
And that's why I like baseball when they have the different stadiums. Like, hey, we're going to build our team around pitching. We have a super far fence, so people can't hit home runs. Football should start to take advantage of that. You want to slow a team down, let the grass grow a little bit higher. No one's measuring it.
Oh, and you're absolutely right. And there's some places that you go to that you walk out and it's like the grass is ankle high. It's like, what are you doing? Like, don't tell me that you had nothing else better to do.
They're winning. That's what they're doing, Matt. They're taking advantage of the situation and doing whatever it takes to win. The Raiders way, I think you'd appreciate that. Maybe not so much.
If you're not cheating, you're not trying.
All right. Tell us what you think in the comments below.
But I also think that last thing with the turf is that if you're making a deeper playoff run too, you're going to run into turf. And I think if you're able to play on that surface earlier in the year, it becomes less of a factor the deeper you go and you end up having to play on that type of surface compared to like you're on the grass surface and now you have to worry about different spikes and different things like that.
Well, the spikes are one thing too, because it's not just the field surface. I see a lot of teams that like have the different branded ones, and then like the guys are falling all the time, and I wonder like if you get a bad batch, does it really hurt your team? And some of them have like the new sleek, like, well, we need them to look cool. Maybe they don't play as well, but it's another aspect too. It's not just the field, it's also the equipment that you're wearing. Like, weren't there like the NBA people that were having issues with like the shoes blowing out? And like you have that, you have jerseys ripping. I also we had this early on when we started this show, and maybe we'll bring it back for one of these segments, revisit it. Like the NBA, like everything's consistent there. It gets kind of boring, like during the regular season. I would like to see teams mix it up like tennis. Tennis, you have clay, you have grass, you have, what's the other one? There's 3 surfaces. I can't remember what the hell the other one is now. But NFL and NBA could do the same thing. Like NBA puts them on blacktop. You want to see teams stop flopping? They're not going to flop on cement. Because then they'll have like their elbow be ripped to shreds. You see the guys flop all the time. They land on a nice laminate surface that's like cushioned. Nah, make them play outside. Plus, that'd be fun, right? Do something crazy. If a team, because what if a team did a clay court, right? It would slow some of the explosiveness
like
now.
Basketball. Hey, what would a player game on a cliff? Oh, your power forward just fell 30,000 feet.
Make it interesting, though. Like, if you're a team that doesn't flop and you were like, hey, this year we're playing on blacktop in our indoor thing, what's the difference if it's indoor or outdoor, right? It'd be just as consistent. You wouldn't have the weather wearing it down, or same with like clay. Is the other one in tennis grass?
Put a chain net on.
Is it turf?
Cut your hand trying to dunk.
Because if tennis is able to have different surfaces, they just call the last one hard, whatever the hell that is. But like basketball, you could have your hard surface be your like wood or whatever. Have a clay, have a blacktop, right? 3 different options, and that's regulated. Football could be the same. Keep it going. I want some teams to bring back AstroTurf because it was the same type of thing. If you're a passing team, like even in college, like Ohio State, they run a system where they're just like running around. Imagine if they didn't even have. It's even harder to push off on like the fake AstroTurf stuff. It'd give them an even more advantage. They'd have to like, I don't know what they'd do for like the dome or whatever, because if it gets wet, it'll be slick as hell, I think. Although I guess the field I played out in Altoona had no roof. It was kind of slick though. I don't know if it rained that day. I can't remember. It's been so long ago. Anything else you have on this before we get to the NFL trade deadline?
No.
All right, let's get that rolling. All right, a lot of moves in the NFL trade deadline. The big one, Matt, our question. Steelers give up Chase Claypool to the Bears. They receive a second-round pick in 2023. Who wins the trade?
Right now, I think Pittsburgh does because they're playing El Stinkola, and I think they should just try to get as much draft capital as they can because I see their playoff streak getting ruined. I don't know that they win another game this year at the route that they're going. And for as much size and as much potential as Claypool's had, he just hasn't lived up to it. He's a big receiver, but he doesn't play like it.
And that's what I was thinking with this. I like to see return like on investment though. They drafted him in the second round. You're giving up a second round pick, so it's kind of even. I would have liked to see the Steelers get a little bit more because he hasn't been awful in the NFL. So like he was on like the all rookie team. It's only his his third year now? Second or third year. So like it's his third year. So he's seen not that much of a drop off. I mean, his stats were pretty consistent. Last year he just didn't score as many touchdowns, but you also had an old Ben Roethlisberger, and now you have nothing at quarterback. You have a rookie that's still learning the game and that's still taking a lot of chances and not really giving you a good chance to score. And some of the stuff that he's tightened up, like he hasn't fumbled the past 2 years. He's still averaging, well, this year it's down. It's like about 9.5 yards of reception. Last year it was 14.6. I think a lot of it's on the quarterback. So I would like to see them. I would have liked to see them get a little bit more in return because I think his limitations and stats have declined. Aren't really showing of what he had. And the Bears, honestly, I don't think the Bears are really in a position to compete either. So I think the trade is kind of weird for them, don't you?
I did think that, and I mean, especially following that up with they traded Roquan Smith to Baltimore.
Yeah, and they got what a second round pick in 2023 and a fifth round pick in 2023. I'll read them because the video sometimes tough.
AJ Klein.
Yeah, linebacker AJ Klein. So you're trying to get some picks in return, but again, it's like, all right, well, what is your goal this season? It just doesn't seem like they have a clear goal to me. That's why the pick, like the trade, doesn't really make sense. Like kind of going back through some of the ones we have on here, McCaffrey. They got
they could have threw in Devin Bush and a 5 and gotten Roquan Smith in the two, that may have been a good move for them.
Well, that would have been a blockbuster deal. But is anyone going to take Devin Bush? Since his injury, he hasn't been the same.
But is AJ Klein that much of a needle mover?
No. Bush had higher upside. I just don't know if he'll ever get back to that level. And he's kind of undersized, so if you can have someone that eats space, like, let's go for it. But the Bears made, like you said, they made a couple of moves. The Niners, like, they made their move for McCaffrey, and he scored all three phases last week. They said it's the first time since LT, I think, doing a pass, a rush, and a catch.
Yeah, it was really nice because I played against Christian McCaffrey in my fantasy league. It was really awesome.
I told you I still don't regret getting rid of him because we still don't know. He played so well, but Deebo Samuel didn't play, right?
It was like suddenly he was healed. He was like Lazarus.
So he's back. Carolina continues to, like, they made their moves last week. I thought that they were going to be able to get rid of more guys. They didn't. They still only had the Robbie Anderson. They picked up, 7 picks between those two deals. And then they kind of stopped, which I was surprised from what I've seen. The other big one to me is Hawkinson going to Minnesota. I feel like he fits in with what they want to do. And with him, Thielen, and Jefferson, right? That's a deadly combo.
And don't forget about my boy Dalvin Cook.
Oh, he's still there? That's a killer offense, though.
Michigan running back, so of course he's still in the league.
Hey, Michigan had Chris Evans returning kicks and stuff for the Bengals last night. Remember him? Classic. Putting guys in the league, Harbaugh is, man. Let's see what else. In terms of running backs, James Robinson moved to the Jets to fill in for Breece Hall. I can't remember if that happened before last week or not. And then, what was the other one? Like, Miami got Jeff Wilson from the 49ers. They're just trying to cut dead weight now because it's like, all right, what are we going to do? And then the Bills get Naheem Hines from Indianapolis, and they traded Zach Moss. And I'm kind of surprised by that move. Is that a reaction to not getting McCaffrey, do you think?
I think probably, and I think it's them hedging themselves because they're trying to really make that push this year. And I think with the way Allen's playing, they do have a shot at running the AFC.
And they definitely do. And that's where I think it really comes down to them and the Chiefs whenever they end up playing. And they put themselves in a decent position.
The Chiefs at this point, I think the other person is within the conference. I think it's the Dolphins.
The Dolphins, though, do you really think that they're going to be able to make that push?
I mean, I think they have enough weapons that they can put you in a tough spot.
I think a lot of people would want to see that. I feel like Miami Dolphins fans have been suffering for a while. Don't you?
They have, and I don't care.
They're on the list. I mean, they traded for Jeff Wilson. I don't know if that moves the needle. And then Bradley Chubb. And they gave up Chase Edmonds, which I didn't even realize he was on their team. So, because wasn't he with the Cardinals for a while?
Yeah.
And so a lot of picks got moved. A lot of picks, if you look at this list from NFL Trade Rumors. They definitely did a good job of putting this together. Because, like, even the NFL, if you try to read their own list on their website, you have to scroll 300 times and it has pictures in there for no reason. It's like, buddy, just tell me what each team got. Who's getting the picks? Because now if I have to sit there and listen to Carolina get 300 draft picks next year, at least I know where they're coming from. But, all right. Let's move back to, our NFL stuff. Anything else you have from the NFL?
Not really anything in particular other than how terrible it is to watch the Steelers anymore.
Well, how do you think I feel, dude? Packers are awful. My man Tom Brady is clearly going downhill. And it's like watching. I feel how Peyton Manning fans must have felt at the end of his career, right? Because Drew Brees kind of quit right before it really happened. They had that one playoff game where wasn't there like a bad call or like a dropped pass or something where they could have went to the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
And then Tom Brady's like in that range where they're 3-5. The division stinks. So like Mariota and the Falcons are leading right now.
But the crazy thing is, like, isn't he leading the NFL in passing yards right now?
Who, Tom Brady?
Yeah.
I wouldn't doubt it. I don't think the offense is really the issue. I think it's a lot of like defensive stuff. And Tom Brady's like, his QBR is just kind of low. Because there's a lot of times where he just misses. Or hell, I guess Mike Evans makes a bunch of big drops for no reason. But like, they shouldn't be getting killed by the Panthers, right? To me, that's an issue. Panthers are awful, and they're in the middle of moving guys around. So they play the Rams. The Rams have an identity crisis of them on their own, where they're like kind of bitter and jealous at the 49ers making moves. But even in that division, Seahawks, they don't care. Seahawks were supposed to be in rebuilding mode. People laughed when they traded Russell Wilson, remember? Now they're in the lead in the division. They're beating the Giants or whatever, so they're knocking it down. I don't even know how good the NFC East is, because are they just hyperinflated playing bad teams? Maybe. I feel like there's always a division like that.
There is, but I also think the Commanders kind of pigeonholed themselves by bringing Wentz in and then declaring he was going to be their guy when the quarterback now, is it Hinkie?
Yeah, is that how you say it? Him or Heineke or something? I don't know. I can't remember how to say it.
Yeah, but he's one of our XFL guys that he played well last year. It was like it probably should have been his team out the gate, and they passed him up. But I think now that he has his chance, like this could potentially be his team, put them on a run.
What do you think? I'm going to save this for a topic too, if I remember it. But what do you think of like the Eagles scrum plays that they've been doing, like the rugby style runs? Do you think that's going to catch on?
It could, if there's someone that can organize it and figure out like exactly how rugby gets away with it. I don't think it would be. You already see more and more teams doing it at the end of half or end of game where it doesn't burn them. I think you could potentially see it.
Maybe I'll bring it in as a video for our bonus on the Patreon. So you can go to southboundsports.com to check that out in the coming weeks. That way it won't sound like complete deja vu when we talk about the scrum plays. But I wonder, in terms of like even an undersized high school team like you had this year, what if you just started to run it? And
we essentially did. We started going to more like what Tiger Ellison called the lonesome polecat, where you just start running like random tackles out and like empty sets with like half your line on one side, half the line on the other, and you just hope that your opponent doesn't adjust correctly. Like, it's a pain to try to game plan against, but it's a tough way to like have that just be your offense.
I know this is early because we're not on college yet, but Penn State did that like 3 times last game against Ohio State, I think, where they pulled in a shift where they had just Clifford in the backfield and a guy on the right and then like 4 guys on the left to run a screen. So they could either run a screen, Clifford could run a draw, which Ohio State called a timeout for, I think, when he went to do that, and then or he could throw the slant if the linebacker stays to spy on him. When I think it worked like all 3 times, I remember. Although the penalty might have been one of those times, I can't remember at this point. But that's one where you have a trick formation, you have 3 options. Like, what if that was just their offense? Like, what would teams do? Because you have the numbers. Do you just let them run screens on you all day? Because you could switch it to either side of the field. So you have the screen built in, or do you have the linebacker spy, or do you just risk having them run quarterback draws all day? Like, what if they had Cam Newton, where he's just going wild, like under center? Like, that'd be awesome.
And I think that's just it. Like, in order for something like that to work, you have to have like a video game type quarterback to be able to make it work, so that if they adjust to the players everywhere else, the quarterback just has that freedom to scramble. I think that would be the linchpin to really make something like that work.
I think the defense could counter it by just doing double stack, where they put in just 2 down linemen in the gaps and have 2 linebackers right behind them. And then that way, whatever way the quarterback's going to run, you can shift to have him cut back and give your other defenders time to come down.
I mean, the other thing is just, if you know going in that the team you're playing is going to use that formation a lot, that you go into like 2 defensive linemen and you go with more linebacker or defensive back type guys that can just run to the football.
Did you just steal my idea? I just said that. Is that your coaching strategy? How do you want me to write some of my ideas down?
No.
Not just 4 verts, Matt. You got to mix in other receiving plays.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. I like running some posts over the middle on a rollback, like a throwback. That's a move you should write down. Let me know when that works.
So you've been watching my film?
No, I have not. Anything else yet for the NFL? I really don't have much this week. Not a good week for my teams. And I had to travel, so I did not get to watch a lot of games.
No.
All right, let's get back into college. College football playoff ranking came out. Let's take a look at that, and we'll start there. All right, the initial college football playoff ranking has been released. They have Tennessee number 1. They would be playing number 4 Clemson on one side. The other side has Ohio State number 2, and they would be playing number 3 Georgia. This will not be the same next week. Tennessee and Georgia do play this weekend. What do you think of this initial playoff ranking?
I don't think it's terrible, because just for the simple fact that I think they did it this way knowing Tennessee, Georgia can get clarified. At some point, Michigan and Ohio State play. That can change some of that dynamic. Like, I think there's more games that are going to be played that it could end up rotating other teams in.
And I think the setup is kind of interesting because Tennessee clearly has the win over Alabama. I want to see what happens with the aftermath of this weekend. Clemson, I'm putting it right here. Clemson is going undefeated. There's no way they lose. They don't play any other solid teams the rest of the year. I'm putting that down. I'm calling out Notre Dame this weekend. They're not losing to Notre Dame even on the road. Write that down, Matt. So Clemson's going to go undefeated. And
I'm writing it down, but then I'm going to laugh at you next week.
Well, maybe it's a reverse jinx. You never know what I'm trying to do here on the show.
Because on the other side, I could see Georgia knocking off Tennessee, and then they just fall to 4.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. I think the way that they have this set up, it's almost like they think Tennessee's going to win. And if they have Georgia initially 3, Tennessee wins, they kind of get what they want, where Alabama's right there in the SEC championship game. If they knock Tennessee off, I think they're really setting up 2 SEC teams. Otherwise, I'm kind of surprised Georgia's not number 2. I know Ohio State struggled against Penn State, but Penn State's a pretty solid team. I know Michigan made them look bad, but I think Michigan's just good too. Like, I think it takes a while for a coach to get their players in. Like, look at how long it took Dabo. And Michigan had an identity crisis. This is around the same time it took for Dabo to get Clemson rolling. Now Michigan's rolling. So I don't think you can kind of just look at what happened last year in the playoffs and laugh and say, like, well, Michigan will just choke again. It doesn't seem that way to me. Like, this is a team that has been beating everybody by basically double digits, Matt. Like, that typically has never happened for Michigan. I think their closest game was Maryland with that garbage time touchdown that cut the lead to 7. no other game has been within 2 scores, right? Or at least 2 scores or less. So keep an eye on that going forward, because you said that like Michigan could be knocked out or Ohio State. I think there's a really real scenario where if Clemson does end up choking a game away, do we get 2 Big Ten and 2 SEC teams? Because like I guess I didn't read them, but Michigan's number 5 right now, and Alabama's number 6. A lot of people are saying that you're going to get 3 SEC teams in. I just don't see it. I don't think that if Michigan and Ohio State play a close game and they're both undefeated, how do you justify having one of those other teams jump them? Right? Because theoretically, Tennessee and Georgia have the same exact scenario. I think the loser of their game is going to be up against the loser of Ohio State, Michigan for that 4 spot. And it's whoever plays closest. Like if Tennessee just absolutely kills Georgia and Michigan and Ohio State go to overtime, I really think the loser of that game is going to get in over Georgia. Because Georgia hasn't looked dominant. I know they blew out Oregon, which is interesting because they're sitting at 8 right now. Them being so high is really helping Georgia. If Oregon were to lose a bunch of games going down the stretch, because like they might not be the Pac-12 champions, is that win as impressive? Keeping them there as like the second highest one-loss team, I think also keeps Georgia in the conversation. But that's just my opinion on it. I don't know. I find it interesting that TCU is undefeated and they're behind Alabama. Remember, Alabama struggled with Texas too. So it's not like, oh, Alabama's been playing lights out and they've only lost to Tennessee. Like, no, they struggled. They struggled to Texas, and Texas isn't good. So you can't tell me like, hey, Texas is that team. That's a quality win. I mean, they're 5-3. They're not a great team to lose to, but like, what happens when TCU plays them? If TCU thumps them, then I think they jump Alabama, right? They would have to. I don't see how you can be undefeated and have a ton of ranked wins. TCU has 4 ranked wins right now when they play, which is how they count them. Alabama is 2-1 against ranked teams. If TCU thumps Texas, I think they jump Bama. And then they're right there. It just really comes down to Clemson losing. Clemson's probably going to play, what, North Carolina? That's going to be the ACC championship game?
Yeah, likely.
Because like they thumped Pitt, which I was surprised at. They play Wake Forest and then NC State. They could be a sleeper pick. If they beat it, who did they lose to? They lost to Notre Dame. North Carolina did, but they could be 11-1, playing an undefeated Clemson in the ACC championship game. They could sneak in as a one-loss team, too. So don't forget about them. They're further down this list at 17 right now. But remember, I think Michigan was down on this list last year, and they were able to get in the playoffs because Michigan was unranked to start the year last year. I don't remember what they were in the first college football playoff ranking because they had just lost to Michigan State last year, right? So they weren't undefeated there. Maybe they were in the top 10. I don't think they were, though. So they snuck in from a lower pick. I think North Carolina would be my sleeper pick this year. The Syracuse games and the Wake Forest games this past weekend kind of hurt the ACC, though. What do you think about that?
I think a little bit, but I don't know. I mean, it's early to tell, and there's a lot of teams on here that could potentially end up losing. I think it still holds true that winning you're in. I think like when you look at NC State or North Carolina at 17, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head that win out, win your conference, and then if a lot of these other schools are losing in front of you, there's an opening to jump ahead of them because each week, you look at the teams in front of them: Illinois, Penn State, Utah, Kansas State, and UCLA. Like those 5, with a loss down the stretch, they jump them. That puts them within fighting shot of the top 10. LSU's playing Alabama here. Is it this weekend?
I think it is this weekend.
that Alabama blows them out, there's opening to jump them there.
And that they're a 2-loss team. I think the ACC having a 1-loss champ and the Pac-12 having a 1-loss champ, I think that they would jump the second SEC and the Big Ten team that's lingering around the top 4 right now. I just don't think that if all things considered, one is a 1-loss conference champ and the other one isn't a conference champ, even though they lost to another top 10 team, I really think that conference champ is going to give some of these other teams a nod. But that's just me. It's still early. You have Oregon, USC, UCLA. How do they battle out? If they get into the territory where they're getting upset and they end up with 2 losses, then maybe we don't see that happen. And that's where you get 2 SEC or 2 Big Ten teams like last year. The other conferences have to have a choke game. Or Oklahoma State was right there last year and they couldn't score on the goal line. If that happens, Georgia probably doesn't make the playoffs last year. Because I just don't think that they would have left Cincinnati out. And they surely weren't going to leave out a Oklahoma State team that just won the conference and had one more win or whatever. Or maybe they would have had the same record, but one was a big conference champ. So that's going to be the deciding factor. Are other conferences going to be able to have a 1-loss or less champion? That's why Clemson's there. They haven't played well, but I'm calling it still. They go undefeated. Let's see what else for the college football. The Penn State game, man, we talked about the whiteout last week. They played at noon. It was very nice of Fox, first of all, to let Ohio State and Penn State play on the Michigan network, the big noon game. That was nice of them because it helps with like their exposure. I know Michigan had to play Michigan State at night, and a lot of people didn't want to see that game either. We'll hit on that here in a second because there was their own controversy there. But with the Penn State-Ohio State game, Penn State was right there. I thought it was weird that the score ended up being 16-14. Ohio State leading, I think, which was the exact same lead Michigan had at halftime against Penn State. It was like a quarter separated, though. I think that ended up being like the end of the third quarter, or maybe the start of the fourth quarter that score came up. And I thought Penn State's really forcing them to field goals. This is the most dynamic Ohio State offense. You keep hearing about how it's the best offense of all time, how they can score at will, Matt. And yet it took them an extra quarter to get the score that Michigan had against the same Penn State defense. So I'm kind of like, I'm not really sure what to think about Ohio State. Like I said, I wanted to rank them number 1. They have the win over Notre Dame. They have the win over Penn State now. But they haven't looked good at times. Do they pull away late? Yes. Is it because they're more talented? Maybe. Is it because the team's better? I don't know. Like there's so many questions with them that I just honestly don't know. They're like, I think that they're going to go undefeated until the Michigan game. And with Michigan's win over Michigan State, I don't want to jinx it, but I think both teams have a great chance at being undefeated. Michigan does have to play 1-loss Illinois. Illinois is what do they have? Like they're ranked in that ranking, but they're 7-1 right now. They're ranked 15th or 16th. I don't know if this is the playoff ranking, but Illinois plays Michigan State and Purdue. I think Illinois could be 9-1 going into the Michigan game. Michigan has to play Illinois and then Ohio State back to back. Could they be looking ahead to Ohio State? Honestly, I don't even think it hurts them. If Michigan loses to Illinois, beats Ohio State, and then beats Illinois again in the Big Ten Championship, they're in the playoffs. Because it's gonna kind of be like what teams have done in the past, like, oh, they won the rematch. Like, that's basically what conference championship games were made to be. But Penn State had a real chance to sneak into the playoffs if they would have beat Ohio State last week, and they didn't get it done. I don't know what else Penn State fans can expect going forward, but it seems to me that Penn State is built to kind of compete with Ohio State. It causes them to struggle with a team like Michigan and their style, and a team like Illinois that pounded them last year and beat them, remember? And it wasn't this ranked Illinois team. Illinois was kind of rebuilding last year. I know Bielema was there. Wasn't he there still?
Yeah.
He was still trying to build that identity. But to me, it seems like Penn State can play against teams trying to run the spread. Like, they can beat Auburn. They can beat Ohio State if they get a couple lucky breaks. They can beat some of these other teams. That's just the way they're built. But if you get a power team, that they really struggle with them. I mean, they struggled with Northwestern this year too. And I know you can blame it on the weather, but like at some point, Northwestern's pretty bad. You should be able to pull away from them, I would think. So as a Penn, like I'm not a Penn State fan, but if Penn State fans watching that game, I don't know how happy they are with their season. Like, what do you think? They could end up 10-2. That's by no means a bad year. But does it feel empty?
I mean, one of the things that I was thinking about, like going back to the Ohio State, is that I feel like they just recruit at such a high level that from player 1 to player 11 on their starting units, for the most part, they're recruiting better people. And sometimes, like, I don't know that you have to have as complex of a scheme, because when I watch them, like, there's still a lot of carryover from when Urban Meyer was there. Like, they're not doing a lot of tricky stuff. It's just like, we're running these base couple concepts, and we're bigger than you, we're faster than you, we're better than you, and we're just going to overrun you. And I think in most cases they get away with it because they can just be the bully on the block. And where they run themselves into issues is when they're going up against someone that has not necessarily equal talent, because I don't know that there's many people that can boast equal talent, but I think it's close, like comparable match. They can dictate a matchup or two and scheme around some of that, and those seem to be the games that give them more trouble.
I almost wonder, like, I hear people say, like, Ohio State looks soft. That's why, like, Oregon can pound them. That's how Michigan scored 5 rushing touchdowns on them last year, and they couldn't stop them in the red zone at all. This year, Penn State kind of had some of those moves where they were able to move the line of scrimmage and get big chunk plays, but really they didn't move the ball until they took shots at the secondary. So it's kind of hard to tell. Like, Notre Dame succeeded against Ohio State doing the same thing. Like, we're going to try to bully you. And if a team like Georgia plays Ohio State with the same, like you said, equal talent, like they're struggling containing like teams that don't have the same level of talent as them. I just don't see like how if Georgia wants to run down their throat, that Ohio State's going to be able to stop it. Sure, they had their defensive end make a couple of great plays, like that really helped them come over the top. You know, that's something that like it seems like Penn State doesn't have anymore. A couple of years ago, they had like Saquon Barkley. They could return a kick. They could break a long run against Michigan and really break the game open. They had Freiermuth, right? They had like these big NFL guys. I just don't see that on Penn State anymore. Like, didn't they have Saquon, Godwin, and Freiermuth at the same time? Or maybe I'm mistaken on Godwin.
Maybe Gesicki.
Oh, Gesicki, maybe you're right. So it's like, but again, how many tight ends and like wide receivers were they putting in the NFL back then? Where it just seems like, did the hype fall off? Is it the NIL stuff? Are they not getting it done? I'm just not seeing, like, you hear about, hey, we got this great running back coming in, and then Michigan bottles him up, and it doesn't even look like he's a Big Ten level guy against that talent. But I think,
look at what Penn State has to do to be competitive. You know, those years, even with Saquon and stuff, they were relying on fast receivers throwing jump balls down the sidelines. They were running read option stuff with Saquon Barkley. And why do you do that? Because you don't have the offensive lineman to just go toe-to-toe straight up. And when you're struggling, like, part of it is compensating for not having an outstanding offensive line. If you have the line, you can just run those zone schemes right down people's throats, and it's like a giant middle finger.
That's why I think, switching a little bit of conferences here, I think that's why Pitt really struggled. I think the loss of Addison really hurt them. Because I had said, watching USC games early in the year, he really helped them stay undefeated for a while. Because when they needed a big play, he was coming up with it. Pitt doesn't have that now. So, like, they're able to win when they get things going, but they don't have a go-to guy that can step up and say, like, yo, I am the guy. And so that's what I think a lot of these top teams are kind of missing. Like Florida State, like when they were playing Louisville, remember they had that one tall receiver, I can't remember his name, but like he took over the game. Some of the teams like Syracuse and like NC State, Wake Forest that are close, you need a guy that can take over the game. Michigan State had it last year with Kenneth Walker. They don't have him this year. What happens? They can throw jump balls, but like, are they going to catch him? I think they got a touchdown against Michigan using that strategy. Happened once. That's not a reliable offense. You need a guy that can just score. Illinois has a great running back that they've been feeding a ridiculous amount of carries to. Is he going to hold up late in the year? I don't know. Like, is that offense going to be something going forward that they're going to win with? I'm just trying to look like, I really think that the expanded playoff is going to help teams like Penn State or like Pitt if they can consistently make the playoff 3 times every 5 years or so. You don't have to make it every year, but you need to be able to make it multiple times in a year, like a couple year span, because that helps recruiting. You make it one time, you're not going to get the recruiting bump. If you can get a couple of NFL guys together, like you said, you can cover some holes up. Like LSU, for whatever reason, with Brian Kelly now, they have a bunch of holes. They're getting hyped up. Even Ole Miss. What do you think about our boy Lane Kiffin going to Auburn, which is the latest rumor? What do you think of that?
I don't know why he would do that. I think that would be a terrible move.
I was going to make it a slide, and I just didn't have time to do it. But Auburn, to me, maybe I'll bring it up next week. Isn't that like the worst job in college football?
I'll take it right now.
I know you would take it, but because you would know that they would pay you. Like in Chiswick coins, they would just give them to you, and then you could go and coach North Carolina and their defense, and then lead them to an ACC championship game, Matt.
No, because if they paid me millions of dollars and then they fired me, nobody would ever hear from me ever again. I would completely go off grid.
I thought you were going to say you would then become governor. Or wait, senator. What's Tommy Tuberville doing these days?
No, I would do nothing. I would do none of it. I would be left alone, which is my ultimate goal in life.
Because they have to play a crossover with Georgia right now, I think. So, awesome. Like, what a negative, right? And then they have to also play Alabama and, like, all the rest of the West teams. And people expect you to win. Because, like, Malzone was beating Alabama every couple of years. So then they're like, well, we're going to get rid of you. Then there were people, like, saying rumors about, like, family stuff. And it's like, then I heard a couple of, like, admin saying that wasn't true and that boosters were starting that. So how crazy are the boosters that they're going to start negative things about their coach just because he's losing? That then the school comes out and is like, yeah, that's not true. Ignore those. But it's like at some point, like the damage is done, right? How do you come back? I also heard they called your boy Hugh Freeze. What do you think of that?
I don't know that would be a good move for him, but I think the Liberty job in itself, he has himself positioned in a good spot after the issues that he had at Ole Miss. That he has what seems like a ridiculous amount of resources at Liberty. He's not having to coach against an SEC schedule.
Maybe I should write some of these topics down. We can do them as things here. So, like, what do we have? Is Auburn the worst job? I'm going to write this down right now.
Well, I mean, like, you just look at the SEC, like, and I'll clump some of those together. Like, I'll clump Auburn with
Ole Miss.
With I'll put them in with LSU. I'll put them in with Mississippi State and Ole Miss.
LSU has a built-in recruiting, but, like, Mississippi State, my man Mike Leach is going to get hammered there. is he held to this high standard as Auburn? Auburn has won national championships, so maybe it isn't the worst. But Ole Miss, like with Lane Kiffin, he's not getting the resources so much that he might be seriously considering going to Auburn. Like, to me, that's insane. But again, like PJ Fleck, supposedly ready to jump to Michigan at any chance he can get. Like if Harbaugh goes to the NFL, he was ready to throw his hat in and leave Minnesota. Had a pretty good career at Minnesota, mind you. But like maybe that, to me, like that's a big step up. Auburn isn't like that. Like it's not like Lane Kiffin's like, hell yeah, I'm going to Alabama. It's like, no, I'm going to Auburn. Like if PJ Fleck left Minnesota and went to Michigan State, wouldn't you kind of scratch your head and say, why would you leave Minnesota where you can win the West to go to a team that has to play Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State every year? Right? That's what Lane Kiffin is rumored to be doing, basically, except he's in the same division. So I guess it would be like, I don't know, maybe Tom Allen.
And
or
I'll
something.
be honest, I think Rich Rod changed the way that I look at some of the coaching stuff. Like I feel like if you get to the Division I level and you have a system and you have the recruits in place to do what makes your system special, I think you ride it out. Like I think Mike Leach gets away with the stuff that he does at Mississippi State, and hell, even at Washington State, he gets away with it because it's a underperforming school in a big time conference. So if he hits an upset every couple of years, he's held a hero. Like they're not expecting him to outright win the SEC, knowing that Georgia and Alabama and Tennessee are there. Like, so he can go.
You're saying Tennessee like they've been good consistently, Matt. You mean Georgia?
Guess what? They're number one right now. So like, when was the last time that you can remember Mississippi State even being close to the top 5?
Matt, they were in the first playoff ranking. You forget about your boy Dan Mullen, don't you?
I forgot about Dopey Dan.
So, don't even talk like that. I'm going to look it up, Matt. College football playoff ranking. What about your boy, the Florida job? Are they already having, or was that the reporter? Like, what a dick move by that guy. Because for people that don't know, like, there was a reporter caught on a hot mic saying, like, he was talking trash on Napier, right? Is that how you say his name?
Yeah.
And, like, it's his first year. Saying that he's going to be a reporter longer than Napier is going to be Florida coach, which, of course, no one from the media really gets fired, although ESPN lays a bunch of people off. I don't know where that guy was from. But, like, if I was Napier, I'd say, like, you, not invited to my press conference ever again. Like, why would you? Right?
Right.
Why would you do that? Why would you? And so, like, for him to come in and just do whatever he was saying, to me, it just doesn't make sense. Like, I know Florida historically has been good, and that's going to be something. But what are you doing at that point? And, Matt, I was actually wrong. Mississippi State was the number 1 team in the first ever college football playoff ranking, they were 8-0 in the second poll. So they were there for two weeks, I think, if this is right.
But you know what? It didn't last.
That's because Dan Mullen went to Florida. He made a mistake. Why would he?
Yeah, he went to that big money. Like, and there's an example. If he doesn't leave and just stays there, what's the state of the program now?
Well, that's what I was saying with Brian Kelly too. Like, you're leaving Notre Dame. Don't you know that the playoffs are going to be expanding, buddy? Sure, you haven't been able to get the players that you wanted, but maybe it's you. As soon as you leave, they get the number 1 class right now. Or at least they had it. I don't know if losing has dropped it yet. I'm sure it will if they get killed by Clemson, you know. Because, like, who's going to go to, like, a 7-5 Notre Dame team? Or could be worse. Could be better. Could end up, like, 9-3 or something. But then they would have to beat USC and Clemson, right? I think
and
those
like
left.
I look at what Coastal Carolina and Liberty do. Because for the most part, they're pretty close to running the perfect slate. If they're able to do that, like, I don't know that those coaches, it helps them to leave. Because if you run a perfect slate, you get an opportunity to just claim your national championship.
Well, here's my next question, Matt. Was taking BYU a mistake for the Big 12? Because they had to give up some concessions. That's why I'm writing these down so that I can bring them in as topics later for our high tempo vids. But I'm going to say this. Was it a mistake? Because you can't play on Sundays, can't do all these extra rules when Liberty is right there. They're on the East Coast. They can become a rival with West Virginia and Cincinnati. Instead, now you're bringing in BYU in the Big 12. Who are they close to? Colorado? No, they're in the Pac-12. Like, are you going to be able to get them back? Like, I don't know what the long term is. And the other thing, I went to text you, but the Big 12 TV deal came in. And so I was going to have it for a high tempo vid, and I'm going to add it on here for maybe in the next coming weeks. Some of the ones that I talk about on the show we'll do for the bonus stuff. So go to patreon.com/Southbound Sports if you want to hear the full version, or subscribe to our YouTube and check them out there. That would be a big help too. But the Big 12 television numbers come in. They're not as bad as I thought they were going to be, but they're still way below. So I think they were coming in. I don't have them written down. Like I said, they were in around 30 million. The projected, after losing Texas and Oklahoma, people thought that they were going to be bringing in like 20 million per school with the additional schools. So now they're getting like 31 million or something per school per year. Great for them, right? But if the Big Ten's getting 75 million or whatever it is in their base contract, not a good deal. Like, you're making less than half of what teams that you're recruiting against, like Nebraska sitting there, an old rival for a lot of those teams, bringing in over double what you're making. I think it's going to be tough for them to continue their high level of play, right?
Unless you're betting on yourself and you're just thinking ours is going to be the school that's going to make a push, and then you're just you're hoping that general interest in your school like drives merchandising. And
well, that's what because I would like to see West Virginia do good. I really don't want to see Pitt left behind, because like right now in theory Pitt and West Virginia are on the chopping block. I wouldn't want to lose that. In an expanded playoff, I would hope that maybe if these conferences keep getting big and like unwieldy, maybe they can rekindle and join a smaller conference. Maybe they're in a conference with Liberty. Maybe they're in a conference with some of these other schools like an App State or something that might not be the best, but they could be the teams that are left behind. And then they can make the playoff. And you can't tell me that a hungry West Virginia, remember when they kicked the shit out of Georgia when West Virginia was in the Big East? What if that was a playoff game? And everyone's laughing, saying like West Virginia shouldn't even be in the playoffs. They're from the smaller conference, and they just come in and kick the shit out of Georgia again. Or remember when they scored 70 on Clemson? Yeah. Like, I think that those are the type of schools where if right now with the playoff not being expanded, they're not getting the type of players that they could get if, say, a West Virginia from a smaller conference makes the playoffs 7 out of 10 years. Because they might get some higher guys, or hell, even transfers, right? I talk about Michigan getting Okie. I remember like Harbaugh grabbing him after the game. It's like a guy like that coming in, even if he's not playing every down, but having a guy that you can put in and just rushing downs that takes, or passing downs, I mean, where he's going to just attack the quarterback and go crazy. It's like it makes it tough on the defense. Why wouldn't some of those transfers go to a school when they can say, we make the playoffs every year? Like, we win our conference. Maybe it helps TCU, but the one thing that's kind of weird to me is like TCU's leadership flying to the Chicago to talk to Big Ten, right? So it's like, hey, we're signing this contract deal, but we're going to win the Big 12 a bunch of times and hope the Big Ten takes us. And maybe the Big Ten does. It wouldn't be weird if Fox says, you know what, we want to be in Texas. I just think like you're going to see a revolving door of teams trying to get in. Let's go to our last topic real quick, like the final bell. I had one topic left to talk about, the Michigan game. I hinted at it earlier. So let's do that, and then we'll run to the extended ending. All right. We talked about it. a week ago when James Franklin brought it up, Michigan tunnel here. So after the game, Michigan beats Michigan State. Again, a game that wasn't as close as what the score felt like because Michigan seemed to stay vanilla and be content with just kicking field goals instead of really trying to open things up. They won like 20-something to 7, I think. I should have had the score here. But after the game, Michigan State players went into the tunnel. 2 different Michigan guys walked into the tunnel to go to the locker room early, and they got jumped by Michigan State players and brutally beat, basically. I mean, it was an attack. Guys were swinging their helmets. I think the one guy got a concussion, injured his nose. I don't know if that's the same player or not. But here you have the Detroit News saying, like, it's basically a brutal attack. Wojnarowski said that it was cowardly. Again, I'm just reading some of the tweets that were put out there. And again, the week before Penn State and Michigan, Penn State goes in first into the tunnel. They stop. And you can see in the video, they're yelling at the Michigan guys instead of continuing into the locker room, right? Ohio State had the same issue. So my question to you, Coach, do you think the tunnel needs to be fixed? Or should it really be on the coach to, if your team's getting in first, and you can watch the full video. I didn't play it here because I didn't know if it would take us down on YouTube. But they go in first. Why are they hanging around? Isn't that on the team going in first, or what do you think?
Well, it's easy to say fix the tunnel, but I'm sure it's been like that since the damn thing was built. So, like, asking them to reconstruct it is kind of pointless at this point. I just wonder, knowing the way that the configuration is, why is there not more security there to escort the teams through, to say this team's going first, this team's going like.
Well, to be honest, there is a video of Michigan State football's like director of whatever football operations. I saw a clip up of him going out of the tunnel, yelling at people to get back. The team was coming through. On the way into the tunnel, he conveniently stopped, watched the Michigan State guys attack the Michigan guy, didn't try to break it up. He ran back in front of the camera to try to block it so that it couldn't be recorded, which to me was kind of weird. And it was like, that's the operations guy? Why isn't he grabbing the players and pulling them back? Like, no one in the video pulled the players back. Like, even if you're another teammate, it didn't look like the Michigan guy was fighting back. I've seen a couple videos.
No, but don't tell me that communications guy or whatever is going to have any type of size to be able to step in there and break that up.
Yeah, but it's the football operations guy. It should be his job to get the guys out of the tunnel. He shouldn't be hanging back with players. Like, that's his job. He led them out of the tunnel in the first place. So, like, that one guy...
I think if you have that type of setup where you know that it could potentially be an issue,
well, it wasn't just
your team go first, or you allow the other team to go first, and then you get to your locker room. Like, the space, and this is a really stupid way of looking at it, but, like, the way the locker rooms were configured at our makeshift home stadium, we went to the same place. Like, very easy, you could get yourself in a spot where you find yourselves in a fist fight in a hallway.
Well, that's where I'm not just calling that one guy out. There are other security guys too, probably on the Michigan side, that are just standing there. Are they not supposed to intervene if a dude's getting hit with the helmet in the head? Like, I'm just surprised that, like, even none of the other players grabbed their own guys and, like, kind of pulled them back. Because I feel like you've seen that happen in, like, other fights. But maybe they thought closed tunnel, not going to get in trouble. Even one of the guys involved came out in the press conference and said, yeah, I didn't see what's happening. I didn't see what happened in the tunnel. Yet on the video, he's shown throwing, like, 3 punches himself. So, like, do they not realize there's a camera there? ESPN had a pretty good high-def shot, which I think, I don't think one of them are on here, but you could see them getting separated on the field in the Tom Vandereen tweet, where he said, like, yeah, they get a little feisty on the field, but there's nothing major. They head to the tunnel, just leave. Just leave. I just don't think that, like, the operations, if it's going to be a thing, I think James Franklin said to give them an extra 2 minutes to get in there. At halftime, are they going to make the games even longer just to get into the tunnel when it hasn't really been an issue? People say, like, oh, it's been an issue with, like, Ohio State coming out and, like, yelling in the tunnel or whatever they're doing. That's a rivalry game. Like, they've never thrown punches in the tunnel, right? Like, I don't think pulling Ohio State into the argument does not help Michigan State's cause at all. Like, brutally attacking someone, hitting him with the helmet, to me, it's like everyone was all over Garrett when he did it to Rudolph, right? This time, it's like 8-on-1. Could you imagine what the NFL would have did if 8 Browns players just started beating the crap out of Mason Rudolph, Matt? Like, would they even play again? I think there are 8 Spartans that have been suspended right now. And to me, like, you're right. They're not going to be able to really do much other than give them extra time to get into the tunnel. But is that extra time going to matter if the coaches don't get their players in there anyway?
But I think that's not on even security. I think that's on the athletic department for Michigan, that have the security, have the protocols in place, knowing that you've had spats with other teams in the past. Address it. Like, do something, put something policy in place of how are we going to get players in, how are we going to get players out. And I don't care how you do it, but you need to have the stones to make a decision and just come up with something. They'll go, well, they're just college players, because that's not good enough.
And I agree. I think the teams, what are they going to do? Enforce a penalty? Like, I'm okay with that. If a team has a certain time to get in the tunnel and they don't, how many sideline warnings do we hear about, or how many, like, sideline infractions? Why couldn't that be the same, right?
And I don't even care. Like, you could even go as far as to say, if you're the team that wins, you're on the field longer. The losing team, get the hell in the locker room.
That kind of surprised me too, because normally, like, if a guy's coming in because he's banged up or something, which I don't know if the Michigan guys were, because I really didn't see the full video of why they were going in, but typically they're with the trainer, right? So it's almost like they weren't. Some of the cell phone videos were obviously they didn't expect a fight to happen, and so it was kind of just like catching a street fight where you don't see what happens in the beginning. You're just kind of seeing what happens after, because people are like, holy crap, they're fighting. Let me pull out my phone and record it. Instead of like, hey, let me, help this guy out so he doesn't get hurt. And so some of the adults in the situation too, because like you brought up about them being college players. Yeah, it would be the same as if there was a fight like anywhere else. Like, what if it was on the sideline? Would they just like let the players go at it and film it?
Well, again, I don't want to attempt to try to compare what's going on a college post-game type scenario compared to a smaller high school. But I know there have been games that I've coached where there have been a lot high emotions. And during those games, whether it be a big victory or a big loss, if it looks like there are players that are emotional, as coaches, we're like, hey, certain guys need to make sure they're in front, certain guys shift to the middle. I'll stay behind to make sure that we have ourselves covered so that if anything goes down, we were able to maintain supervision and step in as we need to keep the kids safe. And that's just a protocol that I follow so that we don't find ourselves in a spot where a big fight breaks out or some kind of major issue comes up that we can't. Once you have the entire 2 programs, you have that feisty mashup between Michigan State and Michigan at the end. It's too late when everyone's together because you have that many people at once. There's nothing that the sideline coaches are going to do. There's not enough bodies to separate all of the people. But you get the guys that are most at risk, and you get them separated, and everybody else just files in, and it's a non-factor.
It's the same with like charging the field, right? Didn't an Alabama player push a fan rushing the field at Tennessee like in the head. And they're like, yeah, we got to review the film on that. It's like, well, what do you expect? Like, if they're grabbing him, I think a fan tried to grab Mel Tucker too, a Michigan fan, and he got kicked out for life is what I heard. I agree with that. Like, why are you trying to touch one of the players or the coaches after the game? Like, what does that accomplish? Don't do it. I just want, and it did look like watching the video now again, it's like there are Michigan guys with him. You just don't see the beginning of what happened, right? Did he like come into the Michigan State side of it and start yelling? Is he literally just walking down the hallway? Because ABC video caught one of the players where it looks pretty bad for Michigan State, where it says ABC's tunnel camera showed that Crump took his helmet off and swung it at Michigan defensive back Green. The video also shows Windman putting his helmet on before attacking Green. Like, he put his helmet on knowing that, hey, I might get punched back, right? Like, to me, those are two blatant moves on purpose. Of course, with a lot of people in the tunnel, you really can't see what set it off. Was he talking trash? I don't know. That's not an excuse for like starting a fight. I just don't know what else could be done. After the game, there are a lot of moving parts. They were also doing their Paul Bunyan celebration, right? So I'm sure a lot of staffers were dealing with that stuff too. But you're always going to have players that want to go back early because they're hurt or something. I think they should be protected. And would a separate tunnel have mattered? Well, if they were going to attack a guy, they could have done it on the field too. So that's my thing on it. All right, let's switch up to the final bell real quick. So thanks for listening to the show. If you have any feedback you want to send us, let us know. If there's any topics you want us to hit on, I was adding some more to the list during this show. Send us a tweet. We're going to start hitting Twitter up a lot more soon as we make some of the adjustments to the show. But thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.